The Outside Story is a new comedy slash drama, mostly comedy. It's written and directed by Casimir Nozkowski, who I'm not familiar with as a filmmaker, but this one stars Brian Tyree Henry, Sunita Mani, Sonequa Martin-Green, Olivia Edward, and a few other faces you might find familiar. It premiered at Rooftop Films last August. I don't know if this is a very Brooklyn type film organization. They're a nonprofit, and I think their festival runs for a while. Like, I think it runs like all summer, if I'm not mistaken. They do like outdoor screenings of like new indies.
That's cool.
I think it's fitting because it is a very, very Brooklyn movie. It's being distributed by Samuel Goldwyn Films, and it was just released this past weekend. We checked it out, and this one follows the story of a guy played by Brian Tyree Henry. His name is Charles, and he's been kind of stuck in his apartment, not because of COVID, but because he's feeling kind of stuck in his career. His relationship with a woman named Isha, played by Sonequa Martin-Green, has just ended. You'll recognize her, of course, from things like Walking Dead, Star Trek Discovery. And while he is in the middle of working on something, he accidentally locks himself out of his apartment. And this is a one crazy day kind of movie where everything that can go wrong for this guy basically goes wrong, including run-ins with a traffic cop who is eager to give out tickets, to, maybe getting to know his neighbors a little bit more. This is a very neighborhood movie. There were parts of this where I was like, this feels like an adult version of Sesame Street almost. And it definitely has a loving look at Brooklyn as this very quirky, offbeat sort of place where anything can happen. And the people there are well-meaning, good intentioned. And I like this movie. I think it's pretty sweet. And I think that it's very simple. It's definitely not going for anything grandiose. But yeah, as a kind of lazy Saturday afternoon watch, which is how I experienced it, I definitely enjoyed The Outside Story. And I really enjoyed seeing Brian Tyree Henry in a leading man role. Will, we were talking about this before the show, that it is absolutely absurd that he has not been a leading man like this before. And I hope this is the beginning of some projects like that for him, because I think he carries his film so well. He definitely has the confidence of a leading man that I don't think has been fully realized elsewhere. But what did you think of The Outside Story?
I mean, to be fair, I should mention that. I mean, basically in season 2, he became a more of a lead character in Atlanta season 2, and I do think on stage he's done a lot of leading roles. So
Sure.
I think he has taken on leading roles. I guess to some extent he was a lead in Godzilla versus Kong, even though I wasn't as crazy about that performance.
I don't think that would qualify as a lead. I think he was part of the ensemble.
Sure.
But no, I don't think that would count.
But it is a natural progression in terms of like he's been doing a lot of these like standout supporting roles, as you were mentioning, like If Beale Street Could Talk. He has arguably the best scene in that movie. Even something like Joker, where he's kind of a throwaway character, he makes a good impression. And he's been overdue for a good actor showcase like this. Though I guess for some reason I was under the impression that this movie was like kind of more of a like kind of subversive film, like I guess because of his position as an editor. Like I thought it was going to be a little bit more of a like kind of like Michel Gondry kind of thing for whatever reason. And this is kind of more of a this is more of a throwback to kind of like casual New York based indies of like the mid to late 2000s or like early 2010s in a way that I found very appealing, because I tend to like those films a lot, and this is no exception. I don't think this is like an amazing film or anything. I don't know if it's a first film, but does kind of feel like that in terms of like, it stretches out the plot in a kind of predictable and outstretched fashion. It's definitely a film that needs to rely heavily on Brian Tyree Henry's charisma and his just natural star power to carry it through, because it's just a lot of like almost vignettes of just like him interacting with these different assorted New York based personalities. Some are a little bit more over the top than others, and I guess your mileage may vary in terms of how much you enjoy wacky New York personalities are I guess some folks find that kind of grating, some folks find that very endearing and charming. I guess I'm somewhere in between. But yeah, I mean, I think as a good showcase for Brian Tyree Henry, I think it generally works. I think his sort of affable screen presence is generally good for this type of project. I think it showcases how he's able to get a lot of mileage out of just like, an eye roll, or just kind of like a like heavy sigh or something like that, just things that, it makes him very dynamic and personable at the same time. And I generally agree with you that as a kind of casual, lazy Sunday morning, afternoon viewing, this hit the spot pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, look, where the film falls short is definitely in the fact that it's very what you see, what you get. There's nothing about this film while you're watching it that's going to be all that subversive or surprising, you know, like you kind of know the lessons this character needs to learn way before he actually learns those lessons. But I think it still works in spite of that because of how charming the cast is here. And the journey is more important than the destination, I think, for this one. The filmmaker I was thinking of the most about this, and what kind of got me a little excited actually about this director, again, it's Casimir Nozkowski, and this is his first film, a feature-length film. He directed another one that was a short film.
That makes a lot of sense.
What I think is very promising about, because it does kind of feel like a short film extended in some ways,
Yeah.
but I really think that this film kind of reminded me a little bit of the way Woody Allen makes films about New York. Now, it's not a one-to-one. This is not a Woody Allen-esque movie in those senses, but I do think that it has that same sort of like loving neurosis like added to the quirkiness of living in New York that is exciting to me because it would be nice if a filmmaker could sort of like put stuff out like this and not be named Woody Allen. I would appreciate that because I really like Woody Allen's films. And of course, you know, as a person, as a human being, I certainly have a difficult time separating the art from the artist in that situation. And so this was a kind of optimistic turn for me. I was like, people can make movies like this still. And, you know, without the baggage, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if we're just gonna talk about some hot button filmmakers, I'll admit to you when I was before we recorded that this kind of reminded me of like an overlong episode of Louis at times, just in terms of it being you said. A very like New York based film about like, you know, like a lot of episodes of Louis just happen to be like him like kind of in a predicament like this where he gets locked out and he has to kind of just deal with these like surrealist type personalities. And I felt like this kind of was a harken back to that, but like you said, with I guess less baggage than it would be to watch an episode or two of Louis right now.
One more person, I hate to even bring it up, but I also thought of Lena Dunham.
Well, she's not quite as I guess taboo as the other filmmakers we mentioned, I guess. Well, I was
because of the Louis thing too. I felt like this could be like an episode of Girls as well, you know, like that HBO show, the way that it would create these sort of bottle episodes where it really is just the character kind of like it's not a one-to-one, but I was thinking about the ways that characters in that show, I could see a character in that show being like afraid of their neighbors or not really connecting with people outside of like the world that they've created for themselves within the apartment, and that being such a specific insular thing for New Yorkers.
Yeah, like a cagey personality who has to kind of get out of their shell and learn something from their fellow man or their neighbor is definitely something that we saw in Woody Allen's filmography and various episodes of Girls and Louis. So, yeah, I think that comparison is apt, though I'm sure that's not the quotes they want on the poster right now.
Right. The next Louis, the next Woody Allen, the next... No. None of that. I only have two major criticisms of this film. The first one I already mentioned, where I just think that a lot of it you're going to see coming, and so it doesn't have much in the way of surprise. But the only other criticism I really have against this is not quite enough of Sonequa Martin-Green. I think that the film could have used a little bit more of her character based on where the film ends up going, especially. There is some messaging in this film about the way jealousy works and, you know, how relationships can be very fragile. And there are points where I wish that it had gone a little bit deeper on that stuff. I think that there's a lot of talking. There's a lot of like talking around this issue, but I never really quite understood where Charles really, there was clearly some baggage that Charles has with this subject that I was waiting for the film to get into a little bit more, and it doesn't quite. And at the same time, I think some of the more fun elements of this film are when we have Michael Crichton's character, who is Andre. And whenever he kind of gets brought into the movie because he's one of the tenants of the building who has to keep helping him out, I think that's when the film has its more fun exposition-y moments, because at least they're within the backdrop of his, let's just say, eclectic apartment But yeah, as a very Brooklyn type movie, it's definitely not the most wide reaching or anything, but I do like movies like this that kind of make Brooklyn feel like a fantasy land. And it kind of reminds me of like The Intern for that reason, where like, man, Brooklyn is gorgeous. Like, but I think that a lot of people will tell you that that is a very, let's say, appealing version of Brooklyn, at least from this film. A loving look at it. Let's say that.
Yeah, if you want a more realistic look at Brooklyn, New York, I would recommend How To with John Wilson.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, I guess for me, this isn't so much a complaint, but more of a general comment in that I feel kind of bad that this movie is coming out now because it has sort of rotten luck in terms of a movie about like learning to embrace your outroverted personality and kind of learning to meet your neighbors and stuff like that.
Extroverted.
Extroverted. My brain's not really working today. But yeah, I mean, just learning to like kind of embrace your fellow man and stuff like that isn't necessarily, I guess, the film that we need in 2020. I think the message of it is very sweet and sincere, but having that and also just kind of, I guess, generally lighthearted depiction of the police is also something that kind of makes
she's a traffic cop, though. And she's the butt of the joke. I don't know. I think that they actually...
Well, there are other cop characters, but yeah, in terms of
I think they aren't treated the same way. So I actually think the film...
That's fair.
Kind of... I thought the balance was okay. Because I was thinking the same thing, but I think that they did very specific things to avoid that, if you ask me.
Sure. No, I think you're mostly right, but it is something that did come to mind for me, so I think it's worth pointing out. Yeah, but I just think... I might have waited. If I were like Samuel Goldwyn, I might have waited until like 2022 to release this, just because I don't know if this is...
I don't know. Because look, people are getting the vaccine now, and people have been shut in their apartments, especially in New York, for a year. So I wonder if the timing might actually be a little bit like get the vaccine and you can experience life like Brian Tyree Henry did in this new movie. I don't know. I feel like the timing could kind of work.
Maybe, I guess, like this should have come out in like the late summer then. Like when people are actually more vaccinated. I don't know. Just releasing it now is a little weird. Like it's not as weird as if I saw this in like, say, like June 2020. Like that would have been way weirder. Yeah,
maybe this is more of an August, September movie, especially because it takes place in the fall. So it is.
That's what I'm
May
thinking.
Doesn't quite. Yeah. You might be onto something there.
Yeah, I just think like maybe not 2022, but like later in 2021. My point just being that it's a little weird to watch this movie right now. But that's not to say that takes the movie down or anything. That just general thoughts. But I do agree with you. I think it is a little clumsy in terms of like kind of gelling all these characters together. I think some characters get a little bit more screen time that I felt was kind of like overbearing. The other characters I kind of wanted to know a little bit more to get a better understanding of Brian Tyree's character. Like you said, I think having a little bit of a stronger understanding of their relationship would have made the ending scene a little bit more palpable, because like it does kind of feel a bit abrupt when we get to like the emotional climax of the film, because we got kind of like flashes of it, but we really didn't fully understand their relationship before then. So I don't know if those moments hit quite as hard as they might have in a different type of film. But I generally kind of I enjoy this kind of genial, affable sort of filmmaking. It's a return to the type of films that I found very appealing as a younger man, and I wouldn't be opposed to seeing them come back, just because we're dealing with a lot of heavy movies with heavy subject matters, and it's nice to see a movie about a guy who's just trying to make the best of a bad situation, and that's sweet. So I generally found this one to be pretty enjoyable.
Yeah, I think, it's low-key, very casual. It's kind of warm and fuzzy, like the polka dot socks that he wears in this. And I think that for me, I'm a B on it. I think if the main performance had been lacking, if they had gotten somebody else, I don't know if I would be that high on it, because it's not the best foundation for a film. But I just think that Henry kind of elevates this thing quite a bit. And so I think it's very pleasant for that reason. And I enjoyed it. It put me in a good mood. And I think that there are plenty of people who could watch this and get something out of it. especially if you're just like breezing through like a streaming service at some point and you come across it, I think that it's a nice little movie that you might have a good time with. So I am a pleasant B on the Outside Story. What about you, Will?
I think this is the definition of a B minus, like a plain Jane B minus type film. Like we said, it's not completely cohesive. It does kind of stop and start a lot. It's a little laggy in terms of pacing and style, even though it is only like I think 85 minutes long. But it does ride on the coattails of Brian Tyree Henry's star power and just being a fairly sweet-natured film that has a lot of likable characters and a romanticized look in New York that isn't cloying or like grating in any excessive fashion. I do think it takes a little while to get going. Like I think you kind of have to settle with the movie for about like 50 or so minutes before it really starts to work its magic. But once the general setup is established, I found it to be a pretty likable and worthwhile film. And I enjoyed the time I spent with it, even if it's not one I'm probably going to revisit anytime soon.
All right. Well, The Outside Story is by far the shortest film we are discussing this week. It is only 85 minutes long, and it has a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. Thank you so much for listening to our show. Be sure to subscribe to Cinemaholics on your favorite podcast app of choice or find us on YouTube. See you all next time.